بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته ورمضان كريم. For those we haven't met since the last 17 days today of Ramadan, and I also especially would like to welcome Dr. Tuba because she's my former boss and she's attending this lecture, and also welcome Dr. Maisa, Dr. Ismail and Dr. Zawawi and all the esteemed guests who are attending this. Actually, I prepared a PowerPoint with lots of details about what is going on in the East Africa region and also what we might expect next. Welcome, Dr. Kamal Inat. Assalamu alaikum. But we had a brief, actually when I engaged with this Center of African Studies here in Homer, the first talks came up about the Ottomans' engagement with Africa, and there were different thoughts about what to name the center here at the university. And I think it has been the right decision that it is an Ottoman African center, because and we just had a brief discussion in my office before I started. This is why I decided not to go in details or follow the guidelines of the PowerPoints which I constructed before coming here. The story of the Ottomans, East Africa as a region, and the Ottomans also as a historical phenomenon or a power which very much engaged in East Africa region. There is a lot of peculiarities about the Ottomans in Africa and also about East Africa regions. The Ottomans, one of the things, Ottomans were empire. They had a huge empire. The first region to think about when they started going beyond Turkey as a land, as a country, they thought about East Africa and the Red Sea. Red Sea as a strategic corridor for international navigation and international trade, and also as an important point for them to protect Muslims. And this is exactly what they have done in North Africa after the demise of Andalusia, and the fears and coercion of the Spaniard or the Spanish to convert forcefully the Muslim into Christianity. So this is one of the ideas that took the Ottomans to North Africa and then took them to certain regions of East Africa. If I just cite one story of Mir Ali Baya, who went with one ship to counter the influence of the Portuguese, who invaded East Africa early on, long before the Ottomans. They captured many areas in East Africa, and Mir Ali went there in 1585, and he was able to conquer and kicked out or free the land of the Muslims in East Africa from the occupation of the Portuguese. He was able to free Zanzibar, he was able to free the region of Mombasa and much of East Africa from the Portuguese with one ship. That is because the Muslims who perceived the Ottomans coming to save them were cooperated strongly with his presence there. This is why jointly they were able to kick out the Portuguese from the region. Then the Portuguese asked for help from the Indians, and they brought many navies from that region, and they were able to recapture Mombasa and the East Africa region from Mir Ali Baya at that time. But he returned again in 1589, and this time he was not successful. Because of these, lots of support came from the Indian subcontinent for the aid of the Portuguese in that region. He was captured and taken to Iberia, and he was forced also to convert to Catholicism. He himself, he went to protect the Muslims there from conversion, for coercive conversion, but he was at the end converted to Christianity and Catholicism himself. This shows how how the Ottomans actually went there. And in our areas of the world, we never call the Ottomans invaders or occupiers or colonialists. The term was never used in our history books. We call it Fath, opening. Only during the war we see, only during Hosni Mubarak, and the political relations was a bit strained between Turkey and Egypt. He gathered lots of intellectuals and he asked to rewrite the Egyptian history and call the Ottoman opening or the Ottoman presence in Egypt as occupiers, as invaders, money, rather than occupation, rather than. This is one of the peculiarities of the Ottoman presence in all Muslim countries. They weren't there for help or to help. This is why they didn't left any colonial legacy. Yes, they left influence, but they were influenced too. The Ottoman language carried much of the languages of those who were under the Ottoman rule for a long time. So the influence were shared between those who went there as saviors, more or less, in certain areas or in certain countries, and also they maintained rules and they maintained presence for a long time. When they went to the Red Sea, the first voyage went from Suez, because they were already there. And they went there, they occupied, they captured the island of Sawakin, which is in the shore of Sudan. It's still there, visited by President Erdogan a couple of times, because Tikka is still refurbishing some old Ottoman buildings there. And they went there, they tried to influence the rest of East Africa region, and they went all the way to South Africa of today, the Cape of Hope. They never stopped their presence or their voyage just in the neighboring Red Sea areas or just East Africa areas, but they continued all the way to South Africa of today. They didn't maintain long presence there, but they tried their best to take over Ethiopia, but they failed 2 times to go up there with high latitude, so they left Habashistan as it is today, but they created Habasha Iyalat in the eastern coast of the Red Sea all the way to Portugal and to Somalia. And that was a long presence for the Ottomans in the region. They went there to free the region from the Portuguese for the first time, and also to maintain this strategic route, which is very important. It was very important in the history of humanity. This is why much of the first colonial endeavors went to the Red Sea first, went to the Bab el-Mandeb and East Africa before anywhere else. Portuguese went there as a first venture, then followed by other colonialists, the Italians, the British, the French, you name it. All kinds of colonialists or colonial powers also they ventured out and went to that particular region, which also interested the Ottomans to go there and maintain strong presence in that region for a long, long time. And these relations never been stopped. Turkey of today also very much involved in that region. They are maintaining the same legacy of the past. And also refurbishing also the legacy, what is left over from the Ottomans in the region. They are actively also reminding people of the region that we were here with you before. This is why we have to maintain what we left or what our ancestors left in this region. So if you go to Harar now, and I've been there, TİKA of Turkey, the Turkish International Development Agency, is actively working to maintain and refurbish all the Turkish or the Ottomans buildings and the Ottomans artifacts which was left there in the region. Not only in Harar, which is close to the Sahel in East Ethiopia of today, but also in the inner land of Ethiopia, all the way to the Aksum, which used to be the capital of all Ethiopia during Nagashi time. So this is to say just a glance over history of the Ottomans in the region. What is the peculiarity of East Africa, which attracted all the colonialists, all the powers of the past, and is still attracting all the powers of the present or the present time? We see the influx of colonial powers in the past. We've seen the influx of the colonial power in the past, and we see also what is going on nowadays in the region. The colonial powers never get together in one place. The superpowers never get together in one place throughout the land or the earth, only in East Africa region. If you go to Djibouti, which is a very small country today, you will find all the superpowers congregating there, having their bases, military bases in that small area because of the importance of this very region of East Africa. The peculiarity of East Africa remain because of these influences, historical influences and present influences of different colonial powers, regional powers, or what have you. The countries have also very peculiar situation. The state building and the state formation was never stable. It is only part of the world in which countries are still not stable. The formation of the country themselves is still splitting. There is a lot of conflict within. It's still a lot of ethnic tensions within these countries. It's still a lot of influence within these countries affecting the real formation and the real stability of the state formation in the region of East Africa. They are still splitting. Sudan is split into two, Ethiopia itself is split into two, and there is a high possibility that it will split in more countries. Somalia is split in two, and there is a high possibility also more parts of the country might also go separately or independently from the rest of the country. So we are witnessing this phenomenon, which has no resemblance anywhere in the world, with the same intensity, with the same vitality, which is present in East Africa. I mentioned, or I titled this presentation, "The Troubles Ahead." Because of these historical facts, because of this historical tension, because of the presence of external influences in the past and in the present, the region is so much unstable, and the politics is so much uncertain. There is a lot of uncertainty, political uncertainty in the region still, not only in the past, but still there is a lot of uncertainty. Sudan is at war with itself. Ethiopia has always been in war with itself. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, or Ubay Ahmed Ali, he himself in front of the parliament mentioned that he's fighting 13 wars in his own country. And this is after the finishing of the government as a central government there. There is so many de facto regions within Somalia itself, Puntland and Jubaland and many, and definitely the Somaliland, which since the 1990s declared itself as an independent country in the northern part of Somalia. And also it will bring more tension and more conflicts and possibly wars in the region, especially after the latest agreement signed between Ethiopia and Somaliland to have a port and to have a navy and to acquire land in Berbera region. And this Berbera port was very much under the attention and the concern of the Ottomans. It was very much taken care of because it was very important. And if we are following the news, the latest corpses officially buried in United Arab Emirates were killed there in Berbera because of I think they were killed by the Shabab movement in Berbera in Somaliland because of the engagement of also the United Arab Emirates in the region there. So it's not one country, it is not just superpowers, even immediate moderate or small powers also are engaging heavily in the region in East Africa. So the situation is not stable in Somalia, it's not stable in Sudan, it's not stable in Southern Sudan, it is not stable in Uganda because especially about the upcoming elections on Uganda, because President Museveni for a long time he tried to be or to continue to be the president. He changed the constitution many times so that he can be elected. So any elections in the region also bring up lots of conflicts. We've seen what had happened in Kenya when they had elections. All the elections also brought up lots of conflicts between different ethnic groups, between different political groupings within those countries. We have problems in Kenya, as I said. We have problems in Eritrea. There is a lot of opposition for the Eritrean government, but what we might anticipate in the near future in the region, because of all this ethnic tension within countries and also conflicts within countries, the possibility of spillover, because these countries, because it have when whatever happened in one country, it will immediately spill over into the other country. What is going on in Sudan now is affecting Chad in the west, and also it is affecting what is going on in Ethiopia right now, because those countries are also engaging, if not directly, but through other means, because they have interests in whatever happened in any of these countries in the region. So we anticipate that any problem going on in any of these countries in East Africa to spill over into the other country. What has been done by the Ethiopians with the Somaliland, it attracted a lot of attention. And also it created a lot of possibilities that wars might become a high possibility. This is why immediately after the signing of the agreement, the president of Somalia went to Eritrea and they talked about the former pact between them, and in which Ethiopia itself was a part, and they decided to jointly rebel any aggression from Ethiopia if it happened. Also, the president went to Egypt, and the Egyptian president publicly declared that we will invoke the Arab Defense Pact in defense of Somalia if it has been attacked, and nobody should play with Egypt in this regard, because Somalia is a member of the Arab League and it should be protected by the Arab countries. And also Turkey also signed an agreement with Somalia to defend it against any aggression coming from any country. This is immediately after the signing of the pact or the agreement with Somaliland and Ethiopia. So this, if it happened, God forbid, it will drag many other forces beyond the region. Egypt is a possibility, Eritrea definite possibility, Turkey might, after this agreement which has been signed recently, United Arab Emirates, which is already engaged, and which there is a credible reports that United Arab Emirates is the one that is encouraged Somaliland to sign this agreement with Ethiopia because they want Ethiopia to be open to the sea. And Abiy Ahmed said he will use force to get into the sea because this is a mistake of the law and the mistake of history. And he's not going to let these mistakes continue. Ethiopia is a very large country with a population of over 120 million, and it's a landlocked. And it's landlocked by small countries like Eritrea, which took all the previous Sahel or shore of Ethiopia when they were one country before 1990s. So there is a high possibility that this tension will continue, and if war erupted between Ethiopia and Somalia, definitely it will attract other parties in the region and beyond the regions. And not to forget Djibouti, which was very much angry because of the same agreement signed with Somaliland, because Djibouti for a long time was very much dependent on the imports and export of Ethiopia through its ports. So it will be the biggest loser if this agreement actualized between Somaliland and Ethiopia anytime in the near future. So Djibouti itself might get engaged in any possible conflict between Ethiopia and Somalia. So the war might drag many countries into this conflict. Let us also not to forget what is between Somalia and Kenya. Part of the conflict between them was settled recently at the International Court of Justice, demarcating the maritime between the two countries because there is a high possibility of oil and gas in that region. So Somalia came out to be the winner, but Kenya, I don't think they will never accept such ruling because they were very much from that region, which is in conflict with Somalia. And also we have to look into the realities of Kenya itself. Much of northern Somalia and much of the east either purely Somalis or Kenyans in terms of their origins, and Muslims. So they are very much different from the rest of Kenya. If you go to the east, you will see lots of similarities with Yemen and Oman. And if you go to the north, it is just a natural part of Somalia, or the old Somalia, which was cut off because of the colonialists. The British cut it off for the sake of Somalia. As they cut off part of Sudan for the sake of Ethiopia, they cut off part of South Sudan also for the sake of Ethiopia, and they cut off Ogaden also for the sake of Ethiopia. So the colonialists, the haphazard demarcation or lining up the territories of these countries will continue to create lots of problems in the future. So we are not settled yet. This is why I say there's a lot of troubles ahead. The troubles that might stem out of this agreement, which Ethiopia is still adamant of actualizing, never backtrack from what it said, and they are mobilizing the whole country in support of this, as they mobilized the country for the Renaissance Dam, which also creates, and it will continue to create a lot of problems in the region, because the Nile water is a lifeline for Egypt. It's a matter of existence for the Egyptians. They have no other water sources other than the Nile, which much of it is coming from the highland of Ethiopia. 85% of the Nile water comes from the Atbai, which the name of the Blue River or Blue Nile, which comes through the Sudan all the way to Khartoum and then follow to Egypt as a Nile. When they confluence or converge with the White Nile, which comes from the Great Lakes in Central Africa, and they follow each other all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. So the Renaissance Dam, it will also be a contentious point or a conflict point anytime in the future between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, and it might drag also other countries into these conflicts. What had happened recently in Gaza also immediately reflected itself in that region. What the Houthis have done immediately reflected itself in East Africa, because Bab al-Mandab is very important to the international trade. It is extremely important to the navigation between north and south, or the south, global south and global north. More than 10% of the global trade go through that tiny strait, which is immediately in front of Somalia. And we have many areas which might be affected immediately by any conflict might happen in that region. We have the Gulf of Aden, we have the Red Sea, of course, which is now almost shut off of any significant international trade or international movements because of trying, the Houthis are trying what they are doing in the Bab al-Mandab with what is happening in Gaza, Gaza Strait. So the regions immediately affected by the war in Palestine, and now we are witnessing again the resurgence of piracy, which was taken as a pretext or as a reason for all these bases which I mentioned stationed in Djibouti and Africa. So what is happening in the Middle East immediately reflects itself there, and what is happening in that region, it will definitely reflect itself in many other conflicts within the Middle East. And it can go as far as political or military powers beyond the regions, because many countries, as I said, they have bases there, and they continue to say that they want this corridor to be open for international navigation and international trade, and they will never let it closed by any power. This is why they immediately made a coalition and they start bombing bases in Yemen. But Yemen, for those who know, Yemen is very difficult. It's a very difficult country. All the invaders who went to Yemen, they settled there as graves, all of them. This is why they call it the grave of colonialists. Whoever went there, because they are all armed. So, and the strait is very narrow. For those who went there and saw the strait, is very narrow. One Yemeni with a propeller in his shoulder or an RPG in his shoulder can threaten any ships crossing that strait. And you know how fragile are the ships, even military ships, even carriers. Big carriers are very fragile. They did it once. We all remember the warship Cole, which was hit in the shore of Aden. And Sudan has to be taken responsible for that, because Bin Laden once lived in the Sudan, so Sudan has to pay $350 million as a compensation for those who have been affected in the coal. And coal was hit by one person in the strait. It was not by a military, just one person carrying a missiles in his shoulder and hit that, because ships are sitting ducks, as President Carter once said. He was very adamant not to let the Pentagon engage in procurement, in buying ships, big ships, to roam the world, because he said, he used to say that they are useless. They can easily be affected or shocked by small arms. So the strait now is fully controlled by the Houthis, despite all the raids made by UK and US and other countries in the coalition, including Bahrain, also participating in the raids against Houthis in Yemen, but they continued to target any ships that's related to the US, related to the UK, related to Israel, whatever the flag those ships are carrying. And this, as I can see, it will continue for quite some time. Even if they had a ceasefire in Gaza, this is a separate case for war in the region. It will continue. It will continue for a long time, and piracy is start servicing up. There's a real resurgence of piracy in the region, and that also it will help the region continue unstable, and also it will help the uncertainty of political stability of the region for quite some time to come. This might be coupled also with many elections. So the wild card I see for the region now is Eritrea and Ethiopia. There is a possible war if the agreement failed with Somaliland, which definitely is not going to be successful because of these powers amassing behind Somalia. The Eritreans will continue to be jittery with the intentions of the Ethiopians, who are adamant to reach the sea by force, if not by agreements such as the one that they signed with Somaliland. And because Eritrea was betrayed, they feel that they are betrayed. Other than the intention to go to the sea by force by the Ethiopians, also because they fought the war along the Ethiopian army in Tigray, and they lost a lot. But when they went to the peace talks in South Africa and in Kenya, they totally neglected their ally, who used to be the Eritreans. So Eritrea immediately changed alliance with the Amhara, and now they are helping, training, and arming the Amhara, who are fighting the central government in Addis Ababa. So these changing out of alliances make the war very much possible, and very much it could be also happen anytime. And if it happens with Eritrea, also it might drag other forces in the region. I don't want to continue, and people are fasting. So I will leave the rest of the gaps for the Q&A. So any question, any comments is welcome, and we hope to elaborate more. And those who are interested, they can also take the PowerPoint. It's more detailed.
Thank you, Professor, for your comprehensive and flourishing presentation. So we can move on question session. So if you have any question.
I have a question, in fact. Now, we spoke about the current intentions between these countries, and in fact they are small in size. So do you think that these intentions are because of ethnical background, or because of the colonial past, the division that has happened? So is it built on ethnicity, or because what colonialism left in these countries? This is the question.
Because of all the things that is plaguing the region. Definitely the colonialist has the upper hand when it comes to trying to understand the situation there. Because ethnicity, the ethnic tensions or ethnic conflict came because the colonialists didn't really bother to take the ethnicity into consideration when they draw the borders of these countries. Intentionally divide and rule. And even the drawing of the border itself, we had a hard time drawing the borders even between us and South Sudan when South Sudan decided to separate. Because the border itself, they occupied the country. In 1922, they issued a closed district ordinance by which no one from the north should go to the south and no one from the south should come to the north. And they established two educational systems, Arabic Islamic education in the north, totally missionary education in the south. And they targeted the Muslim families and their kids. This is why we find out until 1990 there were no Christian in southern Sudan. No Christian. But when they left in 56, we found all the names, all the strange names, Peter, Ali, Muhammad, Ahmed, John, Osman, Hassan. So they converted the young children of the Muslims in southern Sudan. So when we got our independence, we found that there were 18% Muslims, 17% Christians, and those 17% Christians, much of them were formerly Muslims, or at least sons of Muslims. This is what they created. This is not the issue now. I want to talk about the borders. When we decided to separate, we found the borders, which is very strange border. It was never definite. Even the language they use, it is about this area. It is north to this area. So the demarcation itself is very awkward. So to keep the war or the conflict alive, and they did it everywhere. They did it in subcontinent, in Kashmir, they did it in the Middle East, they did it everywhere. So they break. This is why recently, or not very recent, 2006, Jane magazine, it's a military magazine, decided why don't the Middle East has a new map according to the blood. To take care of all these tensions, ethnic tensions within countries, why don't we do the Middle East again, or the East Africa or Africa again, and draw the lines or the territories according to ethnic
nation state.
Pure nation state. This is exactly what they have done. Ethiopia, for example, as a country, it is an old, ancient country, which was never being colonized, especially the one up there. It used to be a small country in the Tigray region when it started. Aksum used to be the ancient capital of Ethiopia. They collaborated and they have alliances with the Amhara, so they exchanges the ruling of Ethiopia in those regions, two regions in northern Ethiopia of today. But later on, during the colonialism, because they always thought that Ethiopia, the population of Ethiopia today, we find out the Muslims are the majority. Because Oromia region, which is almost 90% Muslims, are the biggest ethnic group in Ethiopia, which constitute almost 47 or 46% of the total population. We have the Arab who are Muslims. You have the many other nationalities within Ethiopia. Those who are living in Venetian Gorgons are Muslims. Those who are living in Ogaden, the Somali region, which also cut and added to Ethiopia, are Muslims. Many of the Amhara, original inhabitants of Ethiopia, many of them are Muslims, especially the Wallo group of many Tigrayans are Muslims. So if you counted the Muslims all over the country, they are majority, but they are still looking at Ethiopia as a Christian country. And the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Tawhidi Church of Ethiopia, shares the land just like the Anglican Church in England. Because the land of England is shared between the Queen or the King now and the Church,
Yes.
the Anglican Church, the whole land of the country. And the Queen or the King is the head of the Anglican Church. So the King owns all the land of the country. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church also owns much of the land of the country to give it more power. Until 1928, the Ogaden region, which is the biggest region, has almost 71% of the arable land in the country, from which Abiy Ahmed, the existing prime minister, came from. It was a sultanate, Muslim sultanate, until 1928. And it had a pact with the emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, at the time. But when Aba Ja'far, the last ruler of the sultanate of Gimma, or Oromia, passed away, Haile Selassie revoked the agreement with the Oromia and started a huge missionary campaign in the region. And they were, according to the former agreement, they were not allowed to build any church anywhere in the region. But now wherever you go, even if there is no Muslim in the village or in the town, you find big churches because beside the church they own the land around it. So they were well entrenched in the country. And this is why the British had it up until 1903. Benishangul and Gumuz used to be part of the Sudan, and Gambela used to be part of Sudan and Egypt, by the way, because at that time we were one country. So legally we can reclaim those areas from Ethiopia, from Ethiopia, yes, and many other areas from Kenya. The northern part of, or the southern part of Ethiopia, which is Sidama region, it has 88 different ethnic groups. And during the rule of Meles Zenawi, they gave all these ethnic groupings the right to educate in their own languages. So he created a de facto mini states within the states.
Yes.
And this will continue to continue the conflict within those states. And whenever there is a conflict within the states, it will immediately spill over because of this connection, human connection, tribal connection, ethnic connections, clan connections with Somalia and with northern Kenya and other places. It is meant to be that way by the colonialists.
And do you think because of these states that they are so small that one of the main powers would, at the end, I mean African powers, will take over all the area? Because we are speaking about very little states and they are already in war, like there are many civil wars inside. So
yeah, this is a very, very valid question. This is the real effort of the African Union. The African Union has been working diligently for the last few years until it converted, and since it converted itself from the organization of the African Union to the African Union, with the help of late Muammar Gaddafi, one of the good things he had done in his life, is to create the United States of Africa, to absorb these tensions and to get rid of these small states within the states. So a united Africa will help Africa rid itself from these illnesses of this ethnic tension from within. And they went a long way, because I was there and I attended many reforms within the African Union commissions, and they started with these economic groupings. I'm talking about East Africa Community, which is a COMESA, an economic community. There is no tariffs, there is a lot of facilities giving them the sense that they are one region. And they created big 4 regions and another 4 smaller or sub-regions within Africa, 8 regions, different regions. And now they went, in terms of legislations, they went along. They had a flagship programs. By 2063, Africa has to become a one country.
Do you think this is possible?
From what I know, from the developments that went on so far, yes, there is a lot of bumpy roads along the way. But from what had been done so far, it could be possible. If it is not for the corona and the pandemic, we would have seriously silenced the guns in 2020. But the corona and the economic problems created, the simmering also political tensions within different countries, the recurrence of military coups in West Africa in particular, they delayed. But now we have a free trade agreement already being signed and ratified by the majority of the African countries. And they are looking up to have one passport. They are looking up to have one central bank. So if these institutions actualize, the institutionalizations of other aspects of the political life of the Africans will definitely. Now some African countries are jumping start these initiatives by lifting visas for all Africans. Many countries in Africa now they are lifting visas for all Africans. So there is a lot of hopeful signs, even in East Africa, which I didn't mention. In the PowerPoint, I also looked ahead on the positive sides, looking forward. In terms of economy, yes, despite all these illnesses, there is a lot of hopes in many countries. Tanzania, for example, we were very much afraid that Tanzania would be taken out by the Chinese, the debt trap, or the sovereign debt problems in East Africa in particular, because Ethiopia recently failed to pay the service of our own debt, which amounts for 300 million. This is the service, not the interest, not the debt itself. So the service itself amount annually to $300+ million for a country like Ethiopia. Tanzania, China was able to acquire ports, was able to acquire airports, was able to acquire radio stations, government, sovereign institutions within the country. But now the economy of Tanzania is going up in the positive side. So there's a lot of positive notes to look for in East Africa and in the rest of East Africa.